July 19, 1973, a quiet night at the Washington State Penitentiary. Outside, darkness, interrupted only by the glow of streetlights and the rare sounds of patrols. Inside, one's at the usual routine, guards dozing at their posts, prisoners sleeping in their cells. But one detail disrupts this picture of perfect stability. One of the inmates has vanished. His name is William Wittaker. No one heard a single suspicious sound. No one noticed anything unusual. In the morning, his bed in the cell was simply empty. But this was no ordinary escape. Behind this night lay years of work, patience, and boundless determination. For 10 long years, Wittaker had been digging a tunnel right under the feet of the guards, using only spoons, plastic buckets, and homemade tools. He spent hundreds of nights in the dark, excavating soil, covering his tracks, and creating an electrical and ventilation system for his underground path to freedom. And now he had disappeared, leaving behind only a mystery that continues to captivate minds to this day. What drives a person to spend 10 years of their life on such a plan? How did he manage to remain unnoticed all these years? And most importantly, where did he go after gaining his freedom? The police organized a large-scale search, but Wittaker seemed to have vanished into thin air. This story is not just about an escape. It's a tale of human willpower, of the limits of possibility, and of how sometimes the most incredible dreams can become reality. Are you ready to find out how it all happened? Then let's begin. William Wittaker was a prisoner sentenced for a bank robbery in 1963. His sentence, a long-term imprisonment, became for him not just a punishment, but a point of no return. According to testimonies from other inmates, Wittaker always stood out for his determination and ability to plan for the long term. He considered himself a victim of unjust justice, believing that his crime did not deserve such a harsh punishment. The motivation for the escape was not only the desire to regain freedom, but also the drive to prove his independence to the system. Wittaker never hid his dissatisfaction with the conditions of detention and the prison regime. However, instead of open conflicts with the guards, he chose the path of patience and calculation. "Freedom is worth the wait," he told his cellmates, hinting at his plans, although none of them could imagine the scale of the future project at the time. Wittaker began planning the escape just a year after his incarceration. This indicates that his decision had been carefully thought out long before the first brick was removed from the wall. 10 years before the historic night of 1973, strange rumors began to spread among the prisoners. Some noticed that Wittaker would often disappear for short periods during walks or various work assignments. Others recounted seeing small piles of dirt that would suddenly appear in the prison yard, only to vanish just as quickly. But no one could connect these observations to anything specific. Everything was dismissed as routine cleaning of the grounds. However, there were those who suspected that Wittaker was preparing something serious. One inmate recalled, "I once noticed him hiding something metallic in his cell. I thought it might be some kind of tool." But even this person couldn't imagine that it was homemade screwdrivers and shovels, crafted from plastic spoons and metal fragments. An interesting fact, Wittaker was known for always trying to work alone. He rarely communicated with other prisoners, which made his activities even more mysterious. Rumors about the tunnel began to intensify a few months before the escape, but neither the guards nor the prison administration took them seriously. The Washington State Penitentiary was one of the most secure prisons of its time. Opened in the early 20th century, it had strong walls, a complex security system, and strict detention conditions. The prisoners were under constant surveillance. Each cell was checked at least 3 times a day, and guards with dogs constantly patrolled the yard. The regime for visits and deliveries was particularly strict. All items that could end up in the hands of prisoners were meticulously inspected for prohibited objects. Metal detectors were used regularly, and any attempt to hide something was punished with additional penalties. Despite all this strictness, Wittaker found a way to bypass the system. A striking fact, he built his tunnel practically right under the noses of the guards, using materials that could be found in any prison workshop. For example, the plastic buckets he used to transport soil were part of the standard equipment for cleaning the grounds. The prison was considered impenetrable, but Wittaker proved otherwise. His story became a symbol of how human ingenuity can overcome any obstacle, and now let's find out exactly how he began to bring his plan to life. Wittaker began his work with a detailed study of the prison grounds. During the first few years of his incarceration, he carefully observed the routines of the guards, the daily schedule, and even how repair work was carried out in different parts of the building. He understood that every small detail could become the key to success. For example, Wittaker noticed that one of the walls of the building was made of older and more fragile bricks, which could be easily broken with patience and the right tools. One important factor that helped him in his analysis was working on construction sites within the prison. Prisoners were often involved in repairs or maintenance work, and it was during these tasks that Wittaker was able to get a closer look at the structure of the building. He mentally marked all the weak points on his mental map, from poorly installed tiles to small technical hatches that could be used to disguise the entrance to the tunnel. An interesting fact, Wittaker created his own map of the prison using only his observations and memory. This map became the foundation for further planning. After analyzing all possible escape options, Wittaker concluded that a tunnel was the safest and most reliable method. Other methods, such as climbing over the wall or using fake documents, were too risky and would require many accomplices, increasing the likelihood of failure. The tunnel allowed him to act alone, minimizing the risk of detection. Additionally, the underground route allowed him to bypass the system of surveillance cameras and patrols that monitored the prison grounds day and night. Wittaker also took into account that the soil in this area was relatively soft, significantly easing the digging process. Wittaker chose the tunnel's exit point so that it was located outside the illuminated area of the prison. This ensured that even if his tracks were discovered, the guards wouldn't be able to quickly locate the point of disappearance. Before starting the physical work, Wittaker focused on psychological preparation. 10 years is an enormous amount of time, and he understood that he needed to remain calm and confident throughout. To achieve this, he developed a clear work schedule. Each evening, he allocated a specific amount of time for digging, while during the day he engaged in other activities to avoid suspicion. His initial plan was simple. Start with a small hole in the wall of his cell, then gradually expand the passage using homemade tools. Wittaker had already calculated how much time each stage of the work would take and created a progress chart that he kept in his head. For motivation, Wittaker imagined a specific goal, the place he would go after the escape. Although he didn't tell anyone about it, this goal helped him maintain focus and strength throughout the 10 years. When all the details had been carefully planned, Wittaker took his first step, a small hole in the wall of his cell. This marked the beginning of one of the longest and most thrilling projects in the history of prison escapes. The construction of the tunnel began with the simplest tools that Wittaker could either find or make himself. Plastic spoons from the prison cafeteria were turned into improvised shovels, while metal scraps collected during work on construction sites became the basis for screwdrivers and picks. He gradually created his tools, taking advantage of every opportunity to improve them. One of the key aspects was the choice of material for transporting the soil. Plastic buckets, which were used for cleaning the prison grounds, proved to be the ideal solution. Wittaker carefully carried out small amounts of dirt, disguising it as trash or mud. To avoid suspicion, he distributed the soil in different parts of the yard, mixing it with grass or sand. Wittaker devised a special system for storing tools inside the tunnel. He carved small niches into the walls to hide them from accidental discovery. Wittaker's tunnel was not just a hole in the ground, it was a genuine engineering structure. For lighting, he secretly ran wires from the prison's electrical system. These wires were camouflaged as ordinary repair cables, allowing him to avoid suspicion from the guards. Ventilation became one of the main challenges, as the tunnel was quite long, almost 150 meters. Wittaker solved this problem by installing improvised fans made from old motors of household appliances, which he found in the prison maintenance warehouse. These devices provided a constant flow of fresh air, which was vital for prolonged work underground. Wittaker also created a special chute for moving inside the tunnel. This chute allowed him to quickly travel between the entrance and exit, minimizing the risk of being caught when returning to his cell. One of the most difficult aspects of the project was getting rid of the enormous amount of soil generated by digging. Wittaker developed several methods to conceal it. For example, he scattered the dirt in the corners of the yard, where it could be mistaken for regular mud after rain. On other days, he used garden beds, adding soil while pretending to help the gardeners. To conceal his long-term project, Wittaker learned to control his behavior. He never showed signs of fatigue or anxiety, even when working for hours at a time. Additionally, he always found reasons to be absent from his cell at certain times, such as participating in various prison programs or taking on extra duties. Wittaker created a special schedule for his work, based on the timing of patrols and cell inspections. This helped him accurately calculate when he could safely be in the tunnel. Every step Wittaker took was meticulously planned. His ability to maintain secrecy and make use of available resources made him one of the most successful escapees in history. Now we'll discover how these years of preparation led to the final moment. William Wittaker spent 10 long years building his tunnel, and this figure is no coincidence. Each stage of the work required not only physical strength, but also incredible caution. A tunnel nearly 150 meters long under strict surveillance could not be constructed quickly. Doing so would have been tantamount to suicide. Every detail had to be perfectly hidden from the eyes of the guards, and every step was carefully calculated. The difficulty lay not only in the digging itself, but also in the constant need to adapt to changing conditions. For example, if the guards suddenly began conducting additional cell checks or increased the number of patrols in the yard, Wittaker had to adjust his schedule. He knew that any mistake could lead to the failure of the entire project, so he worked slowly but steadily. In addition, Wittaker planned his work in such a way as to advance approximately 15 meters each year. This allowed him to maintain consistent progress without arousing suspicion. Over the course of 10 years working on the tunnel, Wittaker became a true expert in managing his physical condition. Working with primitive tools and constantly straining his muscles was an enormous challenge for his body. To combat fatigue, he developed a special training system that helped him maintain his strength. One of the key decisions was the use of breaks between work sessions. For instance, when he was in the tunnel, he took short pauses to rest, using them to stretch his muscles and regain energy. Additionally, Wittaker paid close attention to his diet, choosing foods that provided his body with the necessary nutrients. Even with all his preparation, Wittaker occasionally faced injuries, cuts from homemade tools, bruises, and even dislocations. However, he learned to treat himself using medical supplies from the prison's first aid kit. In addition to physical challenges, Wittaker faced serious psychological difficulties. 10 years of working in complete solitude was not just a test of patience, it was a real battle with his own mind. Loneliness became especially tormenting during moments when it seemed like the project would never end. The fear of being caught haunted him daily. Every sound behind the wall, every unexpected visit from a guard could signal catastrophe. However, this very fear became a powerful motivator for Wittaker. He used it as a source of motivation, constantly reminding himself that freedom was worth all the effort. Belief in success was the tuning fork that sustained him throughout the years. Wittaker often imagined the day when he would finally emerge from the tunnel into freedom. These mental images helped him stay calm even in the most difficult moments. To maintain his mental health, Wittaker developed special meditation and concentration techniques. He learned to control his thoughts so as not to let fear overcome his determination. Each day of the decade-long journey was a trial for both his spirit and body, but Wittaker never gave up. When the long-awaited day finally arrived, Wittaker did not rush. Over 10 years, he had learned to be patient, and the final stage of preparation was meticulously planned down to the smallest detail. In the weeks leading up to the escape, he conducted numerous tests to ensure his tunnel was fully operational. Each night, he checked the electricity, ventilation, and structural integrity. He also created backup plans for any unforeseen circumstances. To ensure a successful escape, Wittaker gathered a small set of essential items. These were simple things: several sets of clothing that he had gradually acquired through other prisoners, some food, and water, and a map of the region that he had secretly copied from the prison library. All of this was hidden in a special location outside the prison, where he could access it immediately after exiting the tunnel. Wittaker even took weather conditions into account for the escape. He chose a time when it was raining so the rain would mask his tracks on the ground and make pursuit more difficult. The night of July 19th was like any other at the Washington State Penitentiary. The guards followed their usual routes and the prisoners slept in their cells. But for Wittaker, it was the night of freedom. Around midnight, he began his journey through the tunnel. Every step was familiar after so many years of work, but now he felt a new tension, the realization that there was no turning back. About an hour later, he reached the exit. Before emerging, he carefully surveyed the area through a pre-prepared opening. Once he was sure no one was nearby, Wittaker stepped out into freedom. His first action was to move beyond the illuminated area of the prison to minimize the chances of detection. Wittaker prudently left a false trail, scattering a few items of his clothing in the opposite direction from his actual route. This was meant to confuse investigators and buy him more time to get away. The next morning, the Washington State Penitentiary woke up missing one of its most enigmatic prisoners. None of the guards or other inmates had noticed anything suspicious that night. However, after discovering Wittaker's disappearance, massive checks of cells and the grounds began. One of the guards recalled seeing a strange glow in the corner of the yard around 1 a.m., but dismissed it as a reflection from the streetlights. Other prisoners mentioned sometimes hearing strange scraping sounds, but no one could connect them to anything specific. When the prison staff finally found the entrance to the tunnel, they were stunned by its size and level of technical execution. No one had ever suspected that such a complex project had existed right under their feet for all those years. Wittaker's escape was a genuine shock to the prison administration. No one could imagine that a single person could spend 10 years executing such an ambitious plan while remaining completely undetected. William Wittaker's escape became one of the most sensational incidents in the history of American prisons. After his disappearance was discovered, prison authorities launched a large-scale investigation that drew the attention not only of law enforcement agencies but of the entire nation. Officials began inspecting every cell, every wall, and every corner of the prison, trying to understand how one man could spend 10 years right under their noses, constructing a tunnel nearly 150 meters long. The scale of the search was unprecedented. The Washington State Police, the FBI, and even private detectives were mobilized to capture the fugitive. All prisoners, guards, and prison staff were questioned. However, despite all efforts, Wittaker's trail abruptly ended outside the prison. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. A few days after the escape, messages were noticed in several cities that investigators believed might be linked to Wittaker. For example, anonymous calls to the police pointed to false evidence, diverting attention from the fugitive's real route. Over the decades, dozens of theories have emerged about what happened to Wittaker after his escape. Some believe he left the country using fake documents and now lives under an assumed name somewhere in Europe or Latin America. Others speculate that he managed to integrate into American society, changing his appearance and starting a new life in a small town where no one knows him. One of the most popular theories suggests that Wittaker might have become a consultant for other prisoners or even for intelligence agencies, teaching them security methods and ways to counter escape attempts. His unique experience would indeed have been valuable to such organizations. The story of William Wittaker has earned a special place among legendary escape attempts. It has become a symbol of human determination, perseverance, and the ability to overcome any obstacle. His decade-long plan shows that freedom may require enormous effort, but it is always worth striving for. This story teaches us many things. First, it demonstrates the importance of planning and patience. Wittaker didn't rush. He worked slowly and steadily, step by step, moving closer to his goal. Second, it reminds us of the strength of the human spirit. Even in the most difficult conditions, a way out can be found if one has faith in success. Among other famous escape attempts, such as the legendary breakout from Alcatraz or the story of Andy Dufresne from The Shawshank Redemption, Wittaker's tale stands out for its duration and scale. It shows that sometimes the most incredible dream can become reality if approached with the right mindset and readiness for sacrifice. Thus, William Wittaker will forever remain in memory as an example of how human willpower can change fate, even when it seems there is no hope. If you enjoyed this story and it made you reflect on the strength of the human spirit, give it a like and share it with your friends. And if you want to discover more amazing stories, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new releases. Your support helps us create even more captivating content. Thank you for your attention and see you again soon.